I used to think silence meant peace. That if no one was yelling, nothing was wrong. But silence can slice deeper than any scream. And that morning, our suburban kitchen was a crime scene dressed in eggshell paint and polite restraint. It started small. "Marlene, could you fry up some eggs?" I asked, stretching in my old hoodie, still warm from sleep. She didn't even look at me. Just stood there, barefoot in that oversized beige sweater she always wore when she didn't want to be touched, scrolling her phone like I wasn't in the room. "I'm not your housewife," she said, voice flat. "Cook for yourself." I blinked. "What?" She finally glanced up. Her expression, no fire, no humor, just cold. "Hello." "You heard me." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense. "You okay?" "You're asking me if I'm okay?" she shot back. "Do you ever stop to think how exhausting it is to be everything around here? Cook, clean, smile politely for your family. I never asked for that." "No," she said, dropping her phone on the counter with a clatter. "You just expected it." The room shifted. Something brittle in her tone that I hadn't heard before. Like she was snapping a dry twig that had been cracking slowly for months. "You're twisting this," I said, trying to keep calm. "What is this really about?" She rolled her eyes, grabbing her keys off the hook. "Don't do that. Don't act like you don't feel it too." "Feel what?" She paused, then said the words like they were overdue rent. Like we're roommates who gave up pretending. Then she walked out. No coat. No goodbye. Just the click of the door, and her engine purring down the driveway before I could say another word. I stood there in the kitchen, eggs still cold in my hand. The morning light cut across the counter in those long stripes that made everything look lonelier. Our house was quiet. Too quiet for a Saturday. No hum of a TV. No clink of coffee mugs. Just the leftover tension buzzing like a broken light bulb. And maybe I should have let it go, given her space. But something in my gut twisted. The way she said those words, like she'd been rehearsing them. Like this wasn't about eggs or chores or tired mornings. I needed air. Later that evening, while she was still out, at least, she hadn't come back. I sat down with her phone. Not proud of it. But instinct doesn't care about pride. She'd left it unlocked. Maybe on purpose. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. 2 taps into her gallery, and there it was. A blurry photo outside a Chevron station. Late afternoon sun glaring off car windows. And right there, her face tilted, mouth pressed to someone else's. A kid, barely older than a college freshman. I recognized him. He worked at the gas station near Main Street. I'd paid him with quarters for a car wash last week. His name tag had read Tanner. Now he had his arms around my wife, and her smile wasn't hollow there. It was radiant. I sat back slowly, letting the image burn into my retinas, like staring into a sun you can't unsee. Funny thing, there wasn't rage, not right away. There was stillness. A kind of numb recognition, like my world had just cracked but hadn't finished falling apart yet. This was the moment, wasn't it? The one they never dramatize properly in movies. The realization. The cold slap of truth. And I couldn't even cry. Just whispered to the walls. So that's what we are now. A man, a wife, and a silent war. I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. No. She wanted fire? She'd get ice. You ever have a moment like that, where everything breaks, and somehow you feel more clear than ever? Because this was only the beginning. The next morning, I didn't speak a word to her. She was back before midnight, I think. I'd heard the faint creak of the front door, the light scuff of her shoes as they were kicked off. But I stayed still in the guest room, phone face down, heart steady. At 6 a.m., I was already at the dining table with my laptop open. Steam rose from a fresh mug of coffee, brewed only for one. She padded into the kitchen in sweatpants, her hair twisted up in that lazy bun she wore when she wanted to avoid small talk. The same bun she wore to that gas station, I imagined. For him. She gave me a passing glance, said nothing. I matched her silence. By 6:15, I was logged into our joint bank account. I didn't even hesitate. No shaking hands, no second guessing. I clicked the tab labeled credit and debit cards and deactivated hers. Both the Visa and the Target Red card. Flagged them as suspicious activity. A neat little checkbox. One tick and they were gone. Then I opened a new checking account in my name only. Same bank. Transferred half the savings. The other half, left it untouched. I wanted her to wonder why. I ordered a new card for myself. A different color. Something simple. but just different enough for her to notice when I casually used it next. She was still tapping on her phone when I stood and said, "Hey, just a heads up, there's been some weird charges popping up. I reported the cards as compromised. We'll get new ones in a few days." She barely looked up. "Okay," she muttered, yawning. "Okay. No concern. No follow-up. Just, okay." Like we were discussing the weather? I took a sip of my coffee and held my gaze on her a second longer than usual. Waiting. Testing. She never asked what charges. Never asked if we lost money. Never asked if we were safe. Because she already knew who had been spending what, and it wasn't me. That was my first confirmation. She wasn't sorry. Not even pretending to be. No guilt. No guilt meant no fear. And no fear meant I had work to do. That night, after she'd fallen asleep scrolling TikTok in bed, I sat alone in my office and pulled out a legal pad. Not for notes. Not for lists. For control. I wrote her name at the top, centered. Then mine underneath, with a thin line dividing us. And below that, 3 columns: emotional, legal, financial. In the first box, I wrote dignity, distance, silence. In the second, paper trail, timing, witnesses. And in the third, assets, debt, damage control. It looked like war prep, but it wasn't revenge. Not really. It was insurance. Marlene had chosen something thrilling, fleeting, and messy. I wasn't going to match her chaos. I was going to bury her in calm. In paperwork. In irreversible choices. The next morning, I added an entry to my calendar. Find theatrical cleaner. The irony wasn't lost on me. But you know what they say, if the house is dirty, start with the windows. That way, the neighbors see something's changed. And I wanted her to see change. Slowly, quietly, like the walls around her shifting an inch each day, until one morning she couldn't breathe. This was the beginning of something. Not dramatic, not loud, but deliberate. A subtle shift in wind direction, just before the real storm rolls in. She arrived on a Wednesday, right on time. The kind of punctuality that announces itself without needing to knock twice. Iskra. She was tall, noticeably tall, with that unmistakable Eastern European air of sharp cheekbones and unfiltered directness. Her voice carried the crispness of someone who never wasted words, and when she smiled, it was all teeth and mischief. "I clean. You point," she said, stepping into the foyer, already scanning the house like it was a chessboard. I liked her instantly. I led her around slowly, giving her the rundown of what needed attention. But truthfully, it wasn't about the dust or the grout or the water stains on the glass. It was about presence. Marlene was in the den when Iskra passed by, feather duster in hand, and humming some vaguely familiar Balkan tune. She didn't stop to introduce herself, just nodded once and disappeared down the hall. Marlene looked up from her tablet, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Who's that?" "New cleaner," I said, casually flipping a page in the newspaper I wasn't reading. "Found her online. Great reviews." "You didn't tell me you hired anyone." "I didn't think I had to." She blinked once. No expression, then looked back at her screen. But her scrolling had slowed. That was the first clue. Iskra came twice that week. Always in fitted black pants and bold red lipstick. Her hair tied back in a severe braid. She moved like she owned every surface she touched. Dusting picture frames, opening blinds, shaking out throw blankets with dramatic flair. And she talked. Oh, she talked. Loudly. To me. "Clark," she'd say from across the kitchen. "You want lemon polish or orange? You like citrus, yes? Makes rooms smell like truth." I never answered right away. Just let the silence linger long enough for Marlene to hear the question and the quiet afterward. By Saturday, Iskra had fully claimed the guest room for her breaks. She'd hum while rearranging pillows, linger in the hallway just a second too long, and ask questions that didn't need answers. "You like when house smell clean?" she asked once, running a cloth over the doorframe. "I notice your wife. She not like fresh air? Too cold for her?" I didn't respond, but I saw Marlene's posture stiffen in the reflection of the glass oven door. That night, Marlene cooked nothing, but she hovered more. In the kitchen, in the hallway, near the guest room door. The woman who once scoffed at my breakfast requests now stood near me when I reached for coffee, leaning slightly closer than usual. I'd find folded towels in the laundry room again. The trash bags were tied with neat bows. She didn't say a word about Iskra. Not one. But she didn't need to. Because the energy in our house had changed. Marlene began closing doors more quietly. watching me from behind corners. Her eyes followed me like she was searching for the outlines of a conversation she hadn't heard yet. It wasn't jealousy. Not yet. It was discomfort. And that was better. Let her feel it, the imbalance. The question marks where there used to be period endings. Let her wonder who Iskra really was, and whether this was about clean floors or something messier. The house wasn't just clean now. It was alive. And every polished surface was a mirror Marlene had to look into, whether she wanted to or not. Something changed by Monday. I came home from work and smelled rosemary and garlic before I even reached the door. At first, I thought it was Iskra experimenting again. She had a habit of opening spice jars just to wake the room up, as she put it. But no, this was different. This was dinner. Real dinner. Roast chicken, vegetables, linen napkins. The kind of meal Marlene hadn't made in 6 months, maybe more. She didn't mention it. Just nodded when I walked in, tied her apron tighter, and asked if I preferred red or white wine. I chose neither. Poured myself water. The next morning, she was already folding laundry by the time I stepped out of the shower. Her usual pilot and till-it-topples system had vanished. Socks were matched. Shirts pressed. My favorite jeans, which I hadn't seen in weeks, hung neatly on the door. Found these behind the dryer, she said, without looking at me. Thanks. She gave a smile. Too brief. Too practiced. I didn't ask what prompted the change. I didn't ask if something was wrong. Because deep down, we both knew something was. It became a rhythm over the next few days. Marlene would clean, cook, organize, smile. Iskra would hum, polish, dust, and stay. And the house, our house, became this strange battlefield of gestures. Not words. Never words. I started noticing patterns. Marlene never entered the guest room when Iskra was inside. She'd linger outside, slow her steps as she passed the door, pretend to look for something nearby, then keep walking. But her eyes gave her away. They twitched when Iskra laughed too loudly. They tightened when I responded in kind. She flinched when Iskra mispronounced my name, Clork, like it was an intimate pet name rather than a linguistic misstep. Marlene was unraveling. Not wildly. Quietly. Like thread pulled slowly from a sweater. You don't notice until the whole thing starts to sag. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found her stirring something on the stove. She turned to me with this smile that tried so hard to be warm, but the corners of her mouth trembled. Your favorite, she said. Creamy tomato basil. I nodded. Smells good. She kept stirring, then hesitated. Iskra will be here tomorrow? Yeah. Usual time. Okay. She didn't blink. Just said it like she was trying to pass a test. Like she wanted to prove she was unbothered. But her grip on the spoon was too tight, her knuckles pale. After dinner, I caught her standing in the hallway again, just outside the guest room. Iskra's humming floated through the door, a soft, eerie lullaby from another world. Marlene didn't knock, didn't speak. She just stood there, watching the wood grain of the door like it held some secret she couldn't pry loose. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. She wasn't trying to make things right. She was trying to compete. Not for love, not even for me. For control. Because when you've held the reins for too long, losing them feels like drowning. And Marlene? She'd built her identity on being needed, wanted, obeyed. Now she was none of those things. And she didn't know what to do with herself. But I did. I watched. And I waited. Because sometimes, you don't need to confront the storm. You just open a window and let the wind do the work. The invitation came from my cousin Ricky. Just a casual text. Burgers at my place. Bring your appetite, and maybe your sense of humor. He always had a way of knowing when I needed a break from the theater back home. It was one of those golden late summer afternoons. Blue skies so perfect it made your regrets feel heavier. Ricky's backyard smelled like smoke, sizzling meat, and faint bitterness. The good kind. I arrived solo. Marlene had begged off with a vague headache, but I knew she just didn't want to face people who might see through her. Ricky gave me a nod when I showed up. He handed me a cold drink, clapped a hand on my shoulder, and steered me straight to the grill like we were mid-conversation from 2 months ago. How's the circus? He muttered under his breath, flipping a burger. Lions haven't noticed the ringmaster left, I said, sipping. He barked a laugh. Damn, that's either poetry or pain. Maybe both. We didn't talk about Marlene right away. Ricky wasn't the type to dig where I hadn't invited him. But halfway through his second beer, he leaned in a little and said it. She screwed it up, huh? I didn't flinch. Yeah. He nodded slowly, then smirked. Well, word gets around. That's when he dropped it. Apparently, the affair, the very one that blew a hole through my life, was already over. Just like that. The kid dumped her, Ricky said casually, like he was reading off a sports stat. Ran off with some barista. Tattooed, I think. Kind that wears combat boots in July. I didn't blink. Just stared at the smoke rising off the grill. She's trying to keep it quiet, he added. Embarrassed, I guess. Is that what she said? I asked, keeping my voice even. Nah. Heard it through Cheryl. One of Marlene's friends blabbed at yoga class. You know how it is. Oxygen mats and open secrets. I gave a short nod. Chewed a bite of burger I barely tasted. The beef was juicy, the cheese sharp, but what really sizzled on my tongue was something better than flavor. Satisfaction. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was the first gust of wind pushing my sails in the right direction. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd gambled. Bet it all on a teenage thrill with gas station cologne and fast food charm, and lost. Now she was home folding laundry like nothing had happened, humming songs that weren't hers, smiling in ways that didn't reach her eyes. Because that boy, he walked away before she could even turn her mistake into a narrative. It was almost too perfect. Ricky passed me another drink and raised his eyebrows. So, what are you gonna do? I watched the fire pit crackle in front of us. The wood hissed and snapped, and in the amber glow, I saw the image of her again, standing in our kitchen, pretending like her hands weren't stained. Let her sit in it, I said finally. Let her stir the pot until she chokes on her own recipe. Ricky whistled low. Cold. No colder than she's been. Later that night, back home, she was already in bed when I walked in. Lights dimmed, face buried in a book she wasn't reading. Good barbecue? She asked without lifting her eyes. Yeah, I said, kicking off my shoes. Family's doing well. That's nice. Silence stretched between us. Comfortable for me. Suffocating for her. And as I brushed my teeth, I caught my reflection smiling. Not smug, but steady. Like a man who'd stopped trying to fix what never should have needed fixing in the first place. Because now it was her turn to feel what I'd felt. Replaced. But this story wasn't over. She was still holding out hope. And I was still holding the pen. It was subtle at first. She'd started leaving the house a little more often. Errands that stretched longer than they should. Hair done when she said she wasn't feeling well. Perfume applied for quick grocery runs. That kind of restlessness always shows up late. When control starts to slip and desperation takes its first nervous breath. But that morning, I knew something was different. I was already in the kitchen when she walked in, dressed like she'd rehearsed the moment. Flowing cream blouse, jeans that hugged a little too tight for comfort. She moved slower than usual. Composed, almost delicate. Coffee, she asked. I looked up from the paper, half the words unread, and watched her set down a mug in front of me. Her hands shook just enough to make the porcelain tap the saucer. That was new. I nodded once, took a sip, and didn't say a word. She stood there like she wanted to fill the air with something more. Some explanation or apology she hadn't finished scripting. Then came the twist of fate I hadn't planned, but welcomed like an old friend. Iskra entered, barefoot. She padded softly into the kitchen wearing one of those linen house dresses that could be innocent or suggestive, depending on who was watching. Her braid hung down one side, and she had a rag tucked into her waistband like some domestic Valkyrie. Morning, she said in that lilting accent, eyes on me. You need more polish, yes? I didn't flinch, just smiled gently. Yeah, the window's upstairs. Marlene's back stiffened. Her fingers curled slowly around the edge of the counter, gripping it like it might keep her steady. There was no yelling, no shattering plate, just silence. A silence louder than any accusation. Iskra moved past her, reaching for the broom, humming softly again, something slow, minor key, almost mournful. Marlene turned to me then. Her voice cracked the silence like glass underfoot. She's not subtle, you know. I looked at her. Calm. Measured. She's better at being here than some people. Her mouth parted slightly, a sound forming that never made it out. Instead, she just blinked a few times, then laughed. But it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. A sort of stunned, unraveling chuckle. You're punishing me, she whispered. You think I don't see it? I sipped the coffee again, eyes level. You seeing things doesn't mean you understand them. That shut her down. For now. She walked out of the kitchen without another word, her feet bare, her breath shallow. I heard her close the bedroom door, not slam it, just close it, quietly. And I sat there, alone with Iskra's humming and the smell of roasted beans, thinking, control wasn't just mine now. It had returned to me like a stray dog finding its way home. But I wasn't going to leash it. No, this time, I'd let it run. It happened the next morning. She was waiting for me in the kitchen, already dressed, standing perfectly still beside the sink like a chess piece mid-game. Her arms were folded, her shoulders tense, and her expression? Flat. But the kind of flat that comes just before a storm. I walked in without a word, same as always, my eyes catching hers for just a beat longer than usual. She didn't blink. Then, without prelude, she slammed her coffee mug against the counter. The crack rang out like a warning shot. You need to fire her, she said. My fingers paused just above the drawer where we kept the spoons. Excuse me. Iskra. She needs to go. I finally looked at her fully. She's doing her job. She's doing more than that. A bitter laugh slipped through her lips. You think I don't see what you're doing? I leaned against the counter, folding my arms, matching her stance with calm precision. I'm not doing anything. Oh, come on, Clark, she snapped. She walks around this house like it's hers. Flirting, touching everything, calling you her sweet Clark like it's a joke. She dusts the shelves, I said simply. You used to forget we even had them. Her jaw clenched. She took a step forward, then stopped like her own anger surprised her. She's humiliating me. I let that hang in the air. Let the silence eat at her for a few seconds. No, I said finally. You humiliated yourself. The room stilled. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to hush itself. She didn't respond right away, just stared at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. Like the man she used to interrupt mid-sentence had become a stranger with a spine she didn't remember giving permission to grow. You're being cruel, she said softly. I tilted my head. Am I? She shook her head, voice rising again. This isn't healthy, Clark. We're living in a powder keg. She's provoking me. You're letting her do it. And I swear, if this continues, what? I asked, interrupting her calmly. You'll do what? Leave. The look in her eyes flickered. Guilt, maybe. Or something more primitive. Loss. Because she knew she didn't want to leave. Not now. Not with her reputation crumbling. Not with the boy gone. Not with her footing so unsteady she could barely stand without the walls holding her up. And I wasn't the wall anymore. You're enjoying this, she said, voice like cracked porcelain. Watching me squirm. No, I replied. I'm just letting you feel what you taught me. She exhaled sharply, a noise between a laugh and a sob. Then she stormed out, leaving the broken mug on the counter, its jagged edges gleaming in the morning light. Iskra emerged from the hallway a few moments later, barefoot again, carrying a folded towel. She screamed at you? I nodded once. She smiled faintly, eyes narrowed in quiet approval. Then it is working. She went back to her dusting like nothing had happened. And I stood there, realizing something I hadn't admitted to myself until now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was a reckoning. And it had just begun. It happened like pressure snapping a pipe. 1 minute the air was still, the next, chaos. Iskra was wiping the windowsill in the living room, humming a slow Slavic tune under her breath, barefoot as usual, one leg tucked behind the other like a dancer mid-rehearsal. Sunlight streamed in through the blinds, catching dust motes and turning them into tiny golden storms. I was reading on the couch, or pretending to. Marlene walked in holding a fresh cup of coffee. For once, it wasn't burnt. She had even added a dash of cinnamon, something I told her I liked, years ago. She stood in front of me with the mug in hand, as if offering peace. Or surrender. But she didn't get to deliver the gesture. Iskra looked up, her cloth still moving in small circles. And in that perfect moment of domestic quiet, she tilted her head and asked, You like clean windows, yes, Clark? The pronunciation was deliberate this time. I didn't answer, just glanced up and gave a small smile. That's when Marlene's hand trembled. The coffee sloshed slightly over the rim of the mug, and then, snap. Her voice ripped through the room. That's it. She slammed the cup down on the coffee table. The porcelain cracked against the wood, and hot liquid pooled instantly across the surface, seeping into the grain like anger finding a home. Iskra froze, cloth still in hand. I sat still. You think this is cute? Marlene barked, rounding on Iskra. Walking around like you're some European Cinderella, playing house with a man who isn't yours? Iskra didn't flinch. She just tilted her head again, and smiled faintly. Better to play house than destroy one. That hit her. Marlene's face flushed red so fast I thought she might pass out. You don't know anything about us. Oh, but I clean your messes, Iskra said, her tone syrupy and sharp. And I see very clearly what kind of woman leaves stains no soap can touch. That was the match. Marlene lunged forward, knocking over the basket of folded towels Iskra had just finished arranging. The towels scattered across the floor like surrender flags, soft and useless. You don't belong here, she shouted. Iskra stepped back, but not in fear. In performance. You're unstable, she hissed, her accent thickening. And pathetic. You scream at me because he does not scream at you. Marlene grabbed a ceramic mug from the shelf. Not mine, not hers. One of those novelty ones you get as a gift and never use. She hurled it toward the floor. It shattered against the tile, shards flying like angry little truths. You're invading my marriage. Iskra's voice rose to meet hers, unafraid. Your marriage died the day you kissed child at gas station. Silence. Total. Even I sat up straighter. Marlene's mouth opened, but no sound came. Iskra stood, hands on hips, chest rising and falling. You think I am threat. But you? You already lost. Marlene looked at me. Finally. With eyes full of something raw, rage, betrayal, fear. Maybe even regret. But I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just met her gaze with something harder than anger. Clarity. She turned, fled down the hallway, the bedroom door slamming with a force that shook the walls. Iskra looked at me, then knelt slowly to pick up the shattered mug. One less thing to clean, she muttered. And for the first time in a long, long time. I laughed. Not cruelly, but freely. Because sometimes destruction isn't tragic. Sometimes it's necessary. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. Not out of anxiety. Out of clarity. There was no anger left. No bitterness rising in my chest. Just stillness, like the calm that follows a long, necessary fire. I brewed a pot of coffee and placed 2 mugs on the table out of habit. I only filled one. The kitchen was cold. Quiet. Even the usual hum of the fridge sounded distant. At exactly 7 a.m., I walked over to the drawer where we kept the warranty manuals and outdated coupons. Beneath the stack, exactly where I'd placed them 2 weeks ago, lay the envelope. Inside, divorce papers. Not fresh from a printer. Already reviewed, signed, witnessed. Neatly stacked. Quietly legal. I placed them in the center of the table, right beside the second empty mug. I added a note, handwritten, no more than a single sentence. You bet everything on excitement. This is the cost. Then I sat down and waited. 20 minutes passed before I heard her shuffle into the hallway. Her footsteps slowed when she saw me sitting there, back straight, calm, eyes waiting. She looked at the table, then at me, and she didn't speak right away. Her face was swollen with sleep. No makeup, her mouth slightly parted like she wanted to deny something but didn't know where to begin. What is this? She asked, barely above a whisper. I know everything, I said. She stepped back slightly, like the words had pushed her. What do you mean? I didn't raise my voice. Chevron. His name was Tanner. The photo's still in your phone, by the way. The color drained from her face. You went through my phone? She breathed. I tilted my head. You kissed another man in public. That's not privacy. That's a billboard. She opened her mouth to argue. Her reflex. Always quick to flip the script. But something stopped her this time. Maybe the envelope. Maybe the note. Maybe the way I said I know everything and meant it. You're making a mistake, she whispered. I gave a small, tired smile. So did you. Her eyes glistened. But I didn't reach for her. Not this time. I was confused. She offered, hands trembling. Things were stale. I needed a child, I said calmly. That's what you needed. Not a partner. Just a thrill. Clark, please. She took a step forward. We can fix this. I shook my head once. There's nothing left to fix. You weren't confused. You were selfish. The word landed heavy, and she knew it. She looked down at the papers again, then at the mug beside them, untouched. Do I get a chance to explain? You had weeks, I replied. You chose silence. Or fake dinners. Or tantrums. Her voice cracked. You're throwing everything away. No, I said, standing now, slow and steady. I'm taking back what's mine. She blinked. What's that? I slid my wallet into my pocket, keys already in hand. My dignity. I walked to the door without another word. Didn't look back. Behind me, I heard the creak of the chair as she collapsed into it, and the unmistakable sound of a sob she didn't want me to hear. But it was too late. Way too late. Courtrooms have a strange kind of silence. The kind that hums behind every breath, like even the air is waiting to see who will blink first. She sat across from me at the long oak table, neatly dressed, hair curled, makeup soft, the performance of someone desperate to look like the woman she used to be, or the one she thought the court would believe she still was. I didn't flinch when I saw her, didn't fidget, just watched. She avoided my eyes until the clerk called the hearing to order. Then she finally looked at me. Her gaze searched mine for softness. There was none left. My attorney opened with facts, straight lines, financial records, dates, screenshots, the photograph, the one at the chevron, printed and time-stamped, entered into evidence with a clean staple in the top corner. And Marlene? She cried. On cue. Tears began slowly, delicately, as if this was a love story turned tragedy, as if she was the victim of a cold-hearted man who couldn't find it in himself to forgive. But the judge didn't lean into her narrative. He leaned into mine. Because I didn't yell. I didn't rant or raise my voice. I laid it all out with a calm that was louder than any accusation. The missed credit card payments after I froze our accounts. The week she'd been visiting her sister while her GPS pinged from a hotel near the college campus. The camera footage from the gas station, retrieved legally, time-stamped clearly. The judge's expression barely changed. But I saw the shift. The subtle click of conclusions falling into place. And Marlene? She cracked. Under questioning, her voice wavered. She contradicted her own timeline. Then came the words I had been waiting for. From her. I made a mistake. Soft. Barely audible. But real. The courtroom stilled. It wasn't remorse. It was a white flag. The ruling was swift. Division of assets leaned heavily in my favor. My attorney didn't even need to fight hard. Her story collapsed under the weight of its own inconsistencies. As we stood to leave, Marlene's lawyer leaned in to whisper something to her. She nodded once, then stood slowly. She didn't speak to me. She didn't need to. Because she knew. It was over. Outside, the sun was bright but cool, late autumn light cutting shadows onto the concrete steps. I walked past her without a word, my dress shoes clicking like punctuation marks behind every step. She called my name once. Just once. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. Because dignity doesn't announce itself. It arrives. And leaves quietly, with nothing left to prove. It had been months since the last signature dried. The ink was gone, but the shift it left in my life remained. A permanent scar, but no longer an open wound. I walked past the Chevron station one crisp morning. Same cracked pavement. Same flickering LED sign offering 2-for-1 hot dogs no one ever trusted. But the face behind the register? Different. Not Tanner. Just a middle-aged guy with tired eyes and a quiet rhythm to the way he scanned gum and cigarettes. No flirtation. No fire. Just a man doing his job. Funny how places can look the same and feel entirely different once the ghosts are gone. I kept walking. Around the corner was a bench I'd come to know well. Not for reflection or poetry, but for peace. The kind of peace that comes after the war ends and the noise finally fades. Isker was already there when I arrived. Dressed in jeans and a thick cardigan, legs crossed, hair pulled into a loose braid. No makeup, no pretense. She held 2 coffees. I took the one meant for me without asking. We didn't need to speak much anymore. That was the beauty of it. We weren't lovers. Never had been. Not even now. Just 2 people who'd survived something ugly from opposite sides of the room. Smells like rain, she said, glancing at the sky. I nodded. Feels clean. She smiled slightly. House is easier to clean when no one's spilling lies on the floor. I chuckled. You always talk in riddles? Only when truth is too sharp. We sat in silence for a while. Watched a squirrel dart across the power line. Listened to a car backfire in the distance. No drama. No tension. Just breath and bench. I thought I'd miss her more, I said finally. Iskra looked at me. You don't miss her. You miss who she pretended to be. I nodded slowly. She was right. Marlene had become a chapter. A necessary one. Painful, yes, but also pivotal. Because losing her didn't just strip away a false relationship. It brought me back to myself. The version of me that didn't apologize for needing peace. That didn't accept silence as love or distance as mystery. I sipped my coffee. Warm. Strong. Uncomplicated. You'll meet someone, Iskra said softly, not as encouragement, but as fact. Maybe. You'll be better for them. I looked at her. What about you? She shrugged. I already cleaned my mess. Now I clean others. It's simpler. I laughed again, shaking my head. You ever stop being poetic? Never, she said. It pays better. We sat a while longer, and as clouds rolled in, the wind picked up, rustling leaves into spirals on the sidewalk. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. Iskra stood first. No dust left on you, she said, brushing off her jeans. That's good. I watched her walk away, braids swaying gently, her steps confident but unhurried. And I realized this wasn't about revenge. It never really was. It was about the quiet reclamation of something stolen. Not just dignity, but self. Because sometimes, when everything shatters, you don't rebuild what broke. You build something better. From clean ground.